Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Witness to my own funeral. The darkness came first, then awareness. Not the gentle awakening from sleep, but a violent snap into consciousness, like a circuit suddenly completing. I existed, suspended in perfect blackness, my mind racing while my body lay still as carved stone. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I couldn't move. Yet I wasn't suffocating. Instead, I existed in a state of suspended animation, my consciousness trapped in an immobile shell. Voices filtered through the darkness, muffled at first, then gradually clearer. A somber baritone resonated above me. Russell Mercer was a man of passion and conviction. In his 47 years, he touched many lives with his generosity and spirit. My name, my age, my eulogy. Panic surged through my mind like an electrical storm, but my pulse remained undetectable. I was at my own funeral. The realization crystallized with horrifying clarity. I was presumed dead, yet fully, agonizingly aware. The air around me was heavy with the mingled scents of lilies and formaldehyde. The polished wood of what I now understood to be my coffin felt cold against my back, even through the suit I'd been dressed in. My final suit, chosen without my consent. He leaves behind his loving wife, Margaret, and his daughter, Emily, both of whom he cherished above all else. Margaret. Her face appeared in my mind, soft brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, chestnut hair that caught the light, slender fingers that had touched my face just days ago. Or had it been longer? Time had become fluid, unreliable. I strained against my paralysis, willing just one finger to twitch, one eyelid to flutter. Nothing. My body remained a prison of flesh, unresponsive to my desperate commands. As the prayer ended, footsteps approached. The coffin creaked slightly as someone leaned over it. A drop of moisture, a tear, fell onto my cheek and slid down to my ear. I couldn't even flinch at the sensation. "Oh, Russell." Margaret's voice choked with emotion. "I'll miss you so much." Her words should have comforted me. Instead, they sent a chill through my paralyzed form. Something in her tone, some subtle note beneath the grief, registered as wrong, like an instrument slightly out of tune, not enough for most to notice, but jarring to those who knew the true sound. Memory flickered like a faltering flame. The night before, what I thought was my death. Margaret bringing me a glass of whiskey, the unusual bitter aftertaste, the creeping numbness that had started in my fingertips and spread inward. My heartbeat slowing, her face watching, not with horror or concern, but with patience. The tranquil passage process is revolutionary, a professional voice explained above me. Dr. Howard, I presumed, the mortician from Serenity Gardens Memorial. The synthetic preservation compound allows natural death processes to conclude while preventing decomposition. The funeral home's specialization in this advanced method now seemed like cruel irony. I was trapped in the midpoint between mortality and preservation, held in stasis by chemicals that maintained my appearance, while my consciousness remained horrifyingly intact. And you're certain he's gone? Emily's voice, my daughter, 24 years old, analytical like me, suspicious of convenient truths. Even in my state, pride flickered within me at her questioning tone. Standard protocol requires a 24-hour waiting period before final sealing, Dr. Howard continued. It's mostly tradition, of course. We'll complete the preservation process tomorrow morning, 24 hours. A window of opportunity. That's thoughtful, Margaret remarked, her voice tight. Though I can't imagine why we'd need to wait. The scent of her perfume, vanilla and amber, drifted over me as she leaned closer to the coffin. I felt her fingers brush against mine, a feather-light touch that arranged my hands more perfectly over my chest. The law requires it, Dr. Howard replied, his tone professionally neutral. State regulations for the tranquil passage method are quite specific. I heard Margaret's slight intake of breath, so subtle that only someone who had shared a bed with her for 15 years would recognize it as frustration. The paralysis from the tetrodotoxin. I was certain now that's what she had used. Left me unable even to regulate my awareness. I couldn't sleep, couldn't drift into unconsciousness to escape this nightmare. I could only think, remember, and realize with growing horror what had happened. A door opened. The sound of high heels clicking against the floor grew louder, then stopped beside my coffin. Russell. Margaret's voice, no longer performatively grief-stricken. I need to make sure you understand why this is happening. Her fingertips traced the edge of the coffin, inches from my face. You never truly saw me, did you? Always focused on your own needs, your own desires. 15 years in your shadow, adjusting myself to fit your expectations. Her voice remained quiet, controlled. Did you know I started painting again last year? No, you didn't notice the studio I set up in the garage. Just like you didn't notice when I stopped loving you 3 years ago. Her words sliced through me more effectively than any scalpel. I hadn't noticed. I could have just left, she continued, her voice thoughtful. Divorce is so common, isn't it? But then I'd get half of everything at best. This way, she paused, and I could almost see her smile. This way, I get it all. The house, the investments, the insurance, a fresh start. The funny thing is, she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, no one will ever suspect. Your high blood pressure, your family history of heart problems, everyone saw this coming eventually. Just not quite so soon. 24 hours, she murmured. Then it will be over. I'm sorry it has to be this way, Russell. But I've waited long enough for my life to begin. Time distorted in the coffin. Only the subtle changes in ambient sound gave me any sense of time's passage. The paralysis was absolute. Yet paradoxically, I felt everything. The slight pressure of the coffin's padded interior, the unnatural stiffness of my starched collar. Most of all, I felt the crushing weight of Margaret's betrayal pressing against my chest more heavily than any physical constraint. The sound of the funeral home's front door opening interrupted my thoughts. Multiple footsteps approached my room. I just want to see him one more time. Emily's voice, tight with emotion. Before tomorrow. Of course, Miss Mercer. Take all the time you need. Dr. Howard's professional compassion. Dad. Emily's voice was closer now, directly above me. If only I could move. If only I could signal to her. My daughter, the one person who might question, who might look closely enough to see the truth. He doesn't look right, she said suddenly. I'm sorry? Dr. Howard's voice, confused. Something's off. His color. It's not like when someone's passed. Emily's voice grew firmer. And look at his eyes. The eyelids naturally settle in a slightly open position sometimes, Dr. Howard explained. We generally close them fully before the final preservation. No, it's not that. I swear they moved. My consciousness surged at her words. Yes, Emily. Look closer, Miss Mercer. Dr. Howard's voice was gentle but firm. I understand this is incredibly difficult. Many people experience these moments, seeing what they wish to see. I'm not imagining it, Emily insisted. Something's wrong. Dad had this thing about being buried alive. It was like a phobia for him. He made me promise I'd always check, always be sure. She was right. After reading Poe as a teenager, I'd developed an irrational fear of premature burial. The bitter irony of my current situation wasn't lost on me. I want another doctor to look at him. Emily's voice cracked slightly. Please, just to be sure. That would be unusual, Dr. Howard said carefully, but not impossible. However, we would need next of kin approval. That would be your mother. Then call her, Emily said. Call her right now. The sound of a phone being dialed. Rings echoed through the quiet room. Margaret Mercer. My wife's voice, slightly surprised. After brief explanations, Margaret's voice acquired a careful neutrality. Emily, she finally said, softly chiding. You're traumatized. We all are. But this isn't healthy. Mom, please. Dr. Howard, Margaret interrupted. Is there any medical reason to believe my husband isn't deceased? No, Mrs. Mercer. All standard protocols were followed. Then I think we need to accept reality and allow the grieving process to proceed naturally. The call ended. I felt a surge of desperate hope as Dr. Howard moved closer to the coffin. I'll perform a standard examination, he explained to Emily. I felt his cool, gloved fingers press against my neck, searching for a pulse that the tetrodotoxin had rendered imperceptible. He lifted one of my eyelids fully. The first change in my visual field since awakening in this nightmare. This was my chance. If any part of me could move, any minute twitch or dilation, now was the moment. Pupillary response is absent, Dr. Howard noted clinically. No sign of cardiovascular activity. No! I screamed within the prison of my mind. I'm here! I'm alive! Wait! Emily's voice was sharp. Do that again. Check his eyes again. Dr. Howard obliged, lifting my eyelid once more. I swear I saw something, Emily insisted. A tiny movement. There are certain substances that can create a death-like state, he said carefully. Extremely rare cases, but in my 40 years of practice, I've read about them. What are you saying? Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. Given your concerns and certain subtle anomalies I'm observing, I believe we should delay the final preservation process until we can conduct more thorough tests, just to be absolutely certain. In the stillness of my paralysis, a spark of hope flared to life. I was alone with Dr. Howard. After Emily left to make arrangements for additional tests, he had remained in the viewing room. Mr. Mercer, he finally said, his voice low and measured. If you can hear me, I want you to know that I suspect what might have happened to you. In my younger years, I worked briefly in Haiti, he continued. I witnessed cases there, substances that could induce states virtually indistinguishable from death. Tetrodotoxin is one such agent. Yes, my mind screamed. That's it. The door opened. The familiar sound of Margaret's heels approached. Dr. Howard, she said, her voice carefully modulated. I'd like a word. Their footsteps receded. leaving me alone once more. Minutes stretched endlessly until the door opened again. "I appreciate your understanding, Dr. Howard." Margaret's voice had regained its composure. Something in his tone had changed. The certainty, the suspicion from earlier, had been replaced by a strange formality. Dr. Howard's footsteps retreated, and the door closed, leaving me alone with my would-be murderer. "Well," Margaret said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "that was inconvenient. Your dutiful daughter nearly complicated things," she continued. "But fortunately, Dr. Howard is a practical man. When faced with the choice between pursuing an unlikely theory or accepting a generous donation to the funeral home's renovation fund, he made the sensible decision. Cold horror washed over me. She had bought his silence, his complicity. "The tests won't happen," she explained calmly. "Instead, they'll complete the preservation process tonight. A small adjustment to the schedule, that's all." Her perfume, once comforting, now sickening, enveloped me as she leaned closer. "This isn't just about money. This is about freedom. From your expectations. From your subtle control. The truth is, I've been said for years in our marriage," she said. "Now it's just making official what's been true all along. One of us needed to go. And you always said you'd die for me. Now you get to keep that promise." Time passed. Minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. The door opened again, and multiple sets of footsteps entered. "We'll begin the final preservation now," Dr. Howard's voice announced. "Mrs. Mercer has signed all the necessary authorizations." I felt hands positioning equipment near the coffin, heard the soft hiss of pressurized systems being prepared. "Begin the process," Dr. Howard instructed. I heard a mechanical sound, then the subtle hiss of gas being released into the coffin. The door burst open with a crash. "Stop!" Emily's voice, breathless and commanding. "Stop right now. Miss Mercer, your mother has..." "I don't care what she authorized," Emily interrupted fiercely. "I have a court order. This is highly unusual," Dr. Howard said, his voice tight. "Judge Harriman is a family friend," Emily explained, "and he takes potential medical malpractice very seriously. This emergency order requires independent verification before any further procedures. And I've brought someone who can help with that," Emily continued. "Dr. Langhorne from County General. She specializes in toxicology." "Dr. Howard," a new female voice greeted coolly. "I understand there's some question about this death certificate. I'd like to perform some tests immediately." I felt the preservation gas being shut off. Hands moved around me, unfastening something near the coffin's edge. "I'm drawing blood for immediate analysis," Dr. Langhorne explained, "and I'm administering a counteragent that will neutralize certain paralytic toxins if present." Something cold entered my veins. The sensation, the first active feeling beyond passive awareness since this nightmare began, was shockingly intense. Hands moved over me, clinical and thorough. Fingers pressed against my neck, lifted my eyelids, checked my reflexes. "Interesting," Dr. Langhorne murmured. "Very interesting." And then, a miracle. The slightest twitch in my index finger, imperceptible to anyone not watching for it, but to me, it was an earthquake, a revolution, a resurrection. "There!" Emily's voice triumphant. "His finger moved. I saw it." "Indeed," Dr. Langhorne confirmed, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately. This man is not dead. He's been poisoned with a neurotoxin that mimics death." The room erupted into activity. I felt my body being lifted, transferred, moved with urgent care. "Someone should inform Mrs. Mercer," Dr. Howard suggested, his voice strained. "Oh, don't worry about that," Emily said, her voice carrying a hardness I'd never heard before. "The police are already speaking with her. They were very interested in the contents of her evening tea." "Her tea?" Dr. Langhorne asked. "Yes," Emily replied, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. "The one containing the same substance that nearly killed my father. The one I've been replacing with harmless herb tea for the past week, ever since I found her research on tetrodotoxin on her laptop." As they wheeled me toward the ambulance, I felt the paralysis receding further. A finger twitch became a hand flexing. An eyelid flickered. My lungs expanded slightly more with each breath. I was coming back from the dead. And Margaret was going to a cell. Justice, like life itself, sometimes hangs by the thinnest of threads. But when that thread holds, resurrection is possible. The above story ends, but the suspense and thrill have never stopped. Right here is another equally interesting story. Please continue listening. Rakotsbrücke, the Devil's Bridge. Rakotsbrücke, the Devil's Bridge. Whispers of mystery had long shrouded Rakotsbrücke, the legendary Devil's Bridge in Kromlau, Germany. Stories had swirled about its eerie perfection for generations, how its reflection in the still waters formed a flawless circle. Some believed it was merely an optical illusion. Others claimed it was something more, a portal to the unknown. Hans and Gerda Schmidt had grown up in the shadow of these legends. Their childhoods were filled with hushed tales passed down through the years, some dating back over a century. But the most chilling story was always the same. At certain times of the year, the bridge's reflection wasn't just a trick of the light. It was a gateway, and those who crossed it at the wrong moment were never seen again. Most dismissed such stories as mere folklore, but Hans and Gerda couldn't ignore the unsettling number of disappearances. Determined to separate fact from fiction, they spent months scouring old newspaper archives, compiling every recorded vanishing link to Rakotsbrücke. With each faded article, each cryptic account, a pattern emerged. If their calculations were correct, the next opening of the gateway was near. And this time, they would be there to witness it. Their research had uncovered a chilling pattern. The phenomenon occurred only once in winter, but was far more frequent during unseasonably warm periods in the warmer months. This week, temperatures were set to spike well above normal, and Hans and Gerda were convinced that the anomaly was bound to happen again. Armed with sophisticated audio and video equipment, Hans, Gerda, and several close friends set up camp near the bridge early Monday morning. Their goal was simple: capture undeniable proof of the anomaly. They weren't the first to try, of course, but they were determined to be the first to succeed. Each member of the group would take turns operating the equipment, ensuring the bridge was never left unwatched. Gerda was first. Luck would have to be on her side. She steadied the camera, framing the sublimely unsettling structure as it loomed over the river, its reflection dissolving into the rising morning mist. Days passed as the majestic bridge stood in solemn silence. Time was running out. By Thursday, tension had given way to celebration. The group partied, drank, and danced near the eerie silhouette of Rakotsbrücke, their initial excitement fading into the rhythm of the night. Laughter echoed through the trees, until a sudden burst of blinding white light shattered the darkness. A collective gasp cut through the air. Hans, Gerda, and the others sprinted toward the equipment, hearts pounding. Julio, the group's cameraman for that night, stood motionless, his camera locked onto the event. Then he sighed and shook his head. False alarm. They followed his gaze to the source. A biker gang rolling through the woods, their headlights gleaming off the water, engines rumbling like distant thunder. It was an illusion. The spacing of their bikes on the bridge and the reflection of their lights momentarily brought the bridge alive. From a distance, the bridge looked like a space portal had formed. Are you recording this? Gerda asked Julio. Never stopped. At least we can add it to the footage of our trip when we edit the video. The air deflated from their lungs. Shoulders slumped. Heads hung low. Disappointment settled over the camp like a heavy fog. By Sunday, hope had dried up completely. They packed some of their things, one by one, muttering the same defeated refrain. We'll try again next year. Ever the optimist, Gerda climbed onto a picnic table, raising her beer in defiance. I want to thank all of you for coming to witness what never was, she announced, her voice carrying over the quiet camp. But tonight, we're forgetting about that damn gateway. Tonight, we party like it never existed. A roar of approval followed, and soon, the music and laughter returned. None of them noticed the waters beneath Rakotsbrücke begin to shimmer. None of them saw the perfect gaseous cloud take shape inside the circle once more. Even Julio, who found himself once again on camera duty, did not notice the bridge coming alive. It was midnight, and the others were still lost in their revelry at the campsite. None of them was there to witness what was unfolding. He might have caught it sooner, if not for Fräulein Gretchen. She had been eyeing him since they passed his group while hiking on Monday. Now, as the others partied, she had cozied beside him, drawn to the quiet observer behind the camera. Since he did not drink, he had no problem operating the equipment, though tonight his attention was divided. That night, Julio had his blanket on the ground. Fräulein Gretchen and he were making out when he caught a glimmer of light out of the corner of his eye. Standing up immediately, he checked to see if the camera and audio were working. Gretchen was still playfully fondling his ear with her lips. "Stop. This is important. Can't you see what's happening?" he said to her with a stern but playful voice. "Look at it. It's getting brighter and brighter. Come on, let's get closer." The luminous gateway had a compelling allure, almost trance-like, and it kept tugging at their interest. At the river's edge, there was a small rowboat. They went down to the water, determined to get a closer look. Meanwhile, the light got bright enough to grab the attention of the others partying at the campsite. Hans was the first to notice the light. "Look, guys, the forest is beginning to light up. Must be responding to our partying," he said playfully. "No, I think it's the bridge," Gerda said as she took off, running toward Julio's location. The rest of the gang took off after her. There was no sign of Julio near the video equipment, and the forest glow was getting brighter and brighter. Gerda turned toward the bridge, her thoughts conflicting. She wanted her full attention to find Julio and not care about the bridge, yet the bridge was mesmerizing. Her heart was racing as the ominous light loomed large. "Julio! Julio!" the rest of the group yelled. The yells from her friends temporarily knocked her back to reality. She saw a small rowboat drift through the fog on the far side of the river. Her stomach clenched. That same boat was near them when they first set up the equipment on Monday, and it hadn't moved until now. "Guys, get over here!" Gerda's voice cut through the tense air. She was standing near the equipment. As they gathered around, she maneuvered the camera so everyone could see it. The camera began playback with the motorcycles, and they watched as the humming of the bikes slowly transformed the water. "Look at the water, guys. It appears to be vibrating. Would the sound waves have that big of an effect on the water?" Hans asked. "It must have," she replied as she zoomed in on the water. "When I go back and view the water, it is always completely calm. Something had to stir it." Gerda forwarded the camera to the moment the bridge came alive, and what they saw blew their minds. As they began watching, they heard a female voice. Stunned, Gerda rewound the tape, and sure enough, there was a flirtatious voice in the background. Maybe Julio is at the nearest hotel? A voice in the background whispered, drawing quiet snickers from the group. Quiet! Gerda snapped as they continued watching the video. Then they saw it. The gateway. Look at the bridge! My God, it's real! There's Julio and the girl. Hans pointed. They watched as the two made their way down the steep slope. Julio jumped in the boat first and turned to help Gretchen aboard. Freeing themselves from the riverbed, he slowly rowed toward the ominous, bright light, as if he were in a trance. Gretchen sat in front of him, leaning back on his chest, mesmerized by the gaseous light. They were approximately 30 yards from the gateway, and the recording stopped. What? What happened? Hans asked. I don't know, Gerda replied. No, this can't be happening, she shouted. She rewound the tape for a few seconds and played it back, but the same ending showed each time they watched. Scheisse, Gerda exclaimed. What do we do now? We have 2 people missing, and the tape shows us something, only up to the point where we think they have disappeared. What are we going to tell people? We tell the truth, Gerda. This is why we came here, to find the truth. Hans added, but we don't have the truth. Only partial truths that add to the folklore. This tape will open up more questions than answers, and we will at the tail end of it, searching for more clues. Lynn, Gerda's best friend from London, walked over to her, put her hands on her shoulder, and turned her around so she could cry. Once Gerda's head hit her shoulder, she began to sob uncontrollably. Lynn knew the effect the events had on her. All the time and energy she put into this led to nothing but more questions. She also knew that deep down inside, Gerda wanted to see the gateway in action, even if it was at the cost of her friend's life, which made her feel even worse. Lynn lifted her head. Hey, don't worry. You do have something far more than you ever had. We all know what happened here. Most of it is on tape. I say we immediately make a copy of this tape, take it to the police, and let them investigate their copy. And we have concrete evidence to examine on our own. Next time we are here, we will be much better off than before. Lynn's right, Gerda. We now know a lot more than we ever did. We know the vibrations from the bikes started the gateway. We know that we can't stare at it because of its trance-like powers. And we know the best time to be here and get another shot. Hans added, Yes, that's right, Gerda. The others chimed in. 1 year to the day, the crew set up again. In honor of Julio, they set up a makeshift burial plot at the exact location where the camera stood last year. Gerda felt this new location was better. It was on the other side of the lake and had a better view. This time, the crew was on high alert. There was no partying this time. Their campground was just up the hill from the camera, and they could see partial spots of the lake and bridge from their tents. As they were finishing up with their tents, Lynn ran over to Gerda. "Look at those two over there, Gerda." She pointed. "No, that can't be." They took off running over the bridge, yelling, "Julio! Julio!" A young man turned around as they approached, staring at them, confused. "Yes, how do you know my name?" Epitaphs to Elsa. September 8th, 1986. Elsa, it's just me now. Just me and the waves. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe I just want to believe you can still hear me. The boat is quiet without you. I keep thinking I'll hear your footsteps in the cabin. That soft little shuffle you made when you didn't want to wake me. But I know better. You're not here. And I did that. I miss you. God, I miss you. You never should have stayed with me, Elsa. You should have let me rot the moment you saw what I was becoming. But you never ran. Not when the hunger started. Not when my skin came apart. Not even when you saw what I would do. You should have run. You saw it. That thing inside me. It doesn't care what I want. It doesn't care how much I fight. I don't want to remember them, but I do. That old fisherman just happened to be in the wrong place. He looked me in the eye and knew something was wrong. I saw the way his face tightened before he turned to run. It didn't matter. It happened too fast, and he split apart like a red, stained driftwood after they reached him. I didn't want to hurt any of them, but you know what I am, and you know the worst of it. The only thing in this world that can kill me. Water. The sea, the rain, even a goddamn puddle. You said it was poetic, that all we needed to do was wash the sins away, and that would be it. I wish I could tell you I'm sorry and have that be enough, but I know that it isn't. My mind is slipping. I thought I heard you earlier, but when I turned, there was nothing but the water. I can feel it starting to itch beneath my skin again. I must attend to its needs until morning. Leon. September 2nd, 1986. Leon. I woke up from a terrible dream and could not tell where I was, nor even when I was. For the longest time, I thought I was still in our cabin, with the warped floorboards and the leaky window that rattled in the wind. I thought I heard the waves outside, but they were too far away. I sat up and reached for something, but there was nothing. No warmth, no weight, just a hollow feeling. And then I remembered you. I used to think I could live in your shadow forever, that it was enough to stand between you and the world, to hide what you had become from those who would have tried to take you from me. But you never really belonged to me. You belonged to it. I fed you. I kept you safe and suffered with you. And still, In the end, you left me here. I think I was angry. I still might be. You say you miss me. That you never wanted this. That you never wanted them to die. I believe you. You don't have to look for me. I'm already here. Elsa. September 9th, 1986. Afternoon. Elsa, this isn't real. You're not real. I don't know what kind of madness has settled into my head, but I know what I saw. There is no one on this boat. I searched every inch, Elsa. Every cabin, every hatch. There aren't even footprints, not a single sign that anyone but me has been here. And yet, your letter was waiting for me in the same place I left mine, in your handwriting. Exactly your handwriting. Where are you? What do you mean you're already here? No. No, I won't do this. I won't chase ghosts. I won't let my brain rot on the deck of this damned boat, waiting for another letter to appear out of nowhere. Not when I can still feel the scars where it broke through my skin last night. Raw, burning, until I fed it with something I brought on board. I'll leave this here for you, if only to prove to myself that I'm not completely unraveling. Maybe a drink will help. Leon, September 2nd, 1986. Leon, I can't see the sunset the way I used to, but I know you can. You always liked that time of day best. As the light faded over the horizon, the world softening, I remember watching you, even after you changed. I wanted to believe that if I just held on to you long enough, you would come back to me. I thought love could keep you human. Do you remember what you are, who you have become? You remember the killing, but not the hunger. Do you recall what happened before I died? You used to say that the sea was patient, that it takes its time, wearing things down piece by piece until all that's left is what it chooses to keep. You think you're drifting, waiting to decide how this ends. But you're wrong. You will never truly die here. Not unless you sink. Elsa, September 9th, 1986. Sunset. Elsa, you dated your letter September 2nd. I don't know what kind of joke this is. If this is my mind breaking, or if this is actually you, or if there's no difference anymore. But I know that date. That's the day after you died, and I killed you. I need to say it. I need to write it. I need to stop hiding from it like a coward, because I remember now. I remember the way you looked at me when you realized what I had become. I remember you tried to save me, tried to save them. I remember the knife in your hand and the tears in your eyes when you begged me to just let it end. I remember that you weren't fast enough. I remember the way you screamed when I touched you, the way your body turned to ruin beneath my hands, the way you stopped fighting when you knew there was nothing left to fight for. I remember the moment you stopped being afraid of me. I remember everything, Elsa, and you were right. I am not human anymore. You said the sea is patient. But so is the thing inside me. It waits. It watches. It lets me write these letters like I still have control, like I still have a choice, like I could ever truly leave this boat. But I know better now. I know what I have to do. This time, I'll finish what you started. Leon, September 3rd, 1986. Leon, you stayed up waiting for me, didn't you? You always used to do that when we were kids. You'd sit up by the window, refusing to sleep, until I came back inside. I used to think it was sweet. Now I think maybe you always knew, even before you became this, that you were meant to be alone. I see now that I should have left you alone too, but I stayed and cleaned up after you, wiped their blood from your body, covered for you every time that thing leaked out from beneath your skin. I thought I was protecting you, but I wasn't. I was keeping the monster alive, and that's why you killed me. You can stop pretending now. You remember everything. I tried to end it before it could spread. I would have done it if you'd let me. You should have let me. Instead, you turned on me. You let it break me apart, like all the others. You wept and rocked what was left of me, like I was still yours, like I hadn't just died in your arms. And in some twisted way, maybe I am still yours, but that doesn't matter now. You have one thing left to do. Come visit me where I am now. That is the right thing to do. Love, your sister, Elsa, September 10th, 1986. Elsa, yes, you know me best. I stayed up all night waiting for you. I watched the page, scotch in hand, eyes burning. I wouldn't sleep, not until I caught you in the act and saw how you did it. But I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes, your letter was there, and your last words shattered me. You were my sister, my only sister. You were always there, watching over me, covering for me. You loved me when no one else could, and God damn it, Elsa, I loved you too. We were alone, together, for so long. Maybe that's why it happened. Maybe that's how we fell into something we shouldn't have. Maybe that's why you still stayed after I changed. Why you still brought them to me. I never asked you to do it. But I never stopped you either. And now I see why. Because I was happy. I was happy when you fed me. I was happy when you lied for me, covered for me, hid me. I was happy when you were the only one in the world who saw me for what I was, and still stayed. And I thought that was enough. But you knew better. You knew that as long as I was out here, I wasn't just Leon. I was it. I was the thing that wears me, the thing that spreads itself through my hands, my mouth, my breath. You knew what had to be done, and I stopped you. And now I have to finish it. Elsa, after reading your last letter, I tried something. I let the water touch me. Just a few drops at first. Just enough to test what you told me. And I watched my own skin blacken. I watched it peel away, curl like burnt paper, dust scattering into nothing. And for the first time since that night, I felt something leave me, something I can never let return. I know what I have to do now. I should have done it a long time ago. I'll see you soon, Elsa. Leon. September 15th, 1986. Radio transmission. U.S. Coast Guard Channel. So 8:42 a.m. Yeah, this is Patrol 6 out of Newport, responding to a distress call. We've located the vessel approximately 17 nautical miles offshore, drifting. No signs of life on board. Copy. Unintelligible reply. Copy. Yeah. We're boarding now. The name on the hull matches the missing vessel reported out of Washington last week. Belonged to one Leon Mathers. Yeah. The suspect in the Olympia killings. Still no sign of a body. Over. Hang on. Christ. Do you smell that? Muffled voices. Jesus. It's in the fog. Thick as hell. The air. God, it's like it's sticking to my skin. Unintelligible reply. Boats in rough shape. Some flooding in the lower cabin, but no visible damage. No sign of struggle. Looks like it's just been out here drifting. There's a letter on the table. Several, actually. We've got personal effects. ID matching Mathers. A sudden, sharp breath. Shit. No body. No trace of him. But we found part of someone. It's a leg. Left, severed mid-thigh. Not clean. No ID yet. Yeah. We'll check the water next. Shuffling, movement. The soft slosh of waves lapping against the hull. Oh, hell. Sir, you need to hear this part. Listen, there's something in the water. Around the boat. Not oil, not debris. It's dark. Black as ink. Looks like it's mixed with the waves, but it's thicker. Like it's trying to hold its shape. God, it's moving. No, I'm serious. It's bubbling. It's a pause, a quick breath. Alive. Chunks in it. Carbon, maybe. But some of them, another sharp breath. Some of them are floating against the current. A quiet, shaken voice in the background. It's watching. Sir? Orders? Unintelligible reply. Collecting samples now. We'll tow the vessel back to port. End transmission. Car radio. The silence is deafening. Finley stares at the empty slot where the radio should be. The hole in the center console mocks him. The engine roars and jumps to life. Finley laughs at the power and presses the gas pedal. The engine responds and races down the street. He sighs and shrugs off the silence. At least it's a nice car, he thinks to himself. Finley grips the steering wheel tighter and continues to drive. He's never driven a convertible before. The large amount of snacks sits in the passenger seat. 3 bags of chips, several candy bars, a meat stick, a couple of grape sodas, Red Bull, and an orange Gatorade are piled into a small mountain next to Finley. There is also $437 in his pocket. Finley glances at the convenience store in the rear view mirror as he drives away. The gun wasn't loaded, But the clerk behind the desk didn't need to know that. She graciously gives up her drawer in exchange for her life. Finley smiles as the memory of the robbery passes through his head again. "Everything in the drawer, now!" he shouts. The clerk cries, but nods in understanding and opens the register. Ding. This is much easier with a gun, thinks Finley. He grins under his mask. He holds the basket of snacks in his free hand and points the gun at the clerk. Ida is the name on her shirt. She's short with straight black hair and small eyes. Tears run down her cheeks as she collects the bills. With a shaky hand, she gives the money to Finley. "Thank you," Finley decides to say. He runs out the store and watches as a Chevrolet Corvette pulls up to the store. An older gentleman shuts off the engine and opens the door to get out. He sees the gun before he sees Finley. "Give me the keys," Finley says loudly to the man. The elderly man jumps in surprise and quickly hands the keys to Finley. Finley dumps the basket of snacks into the passenger seat, puts the car in reverse, and drives down the road. When he is clear of the scene, he pulls off his mask and tosses it on the floor. He goes to adjust the radio, but the dial isn't there. The whole compartment is empty. Finley is an average man with an average build. His curly locks meet his eyebrows and licks his earlobes. His eyes are wide and too big for his narrow face, close together with long lashes. Stubble on his chin creeps its way up to his sideburns. The long bridge of his nose flares into broad nostrils, and his big pink lips pushes out from his face. He has a birthmark in the shape of a small diamond under his left eye. His cheeks are freckled and covered with a thin layer of dirt. Finley prefers Xbox over PlayStation and drinks apple juice more than a grown man should. He hates roller coasters because he has to sit next to strangers. He loves school, but dropped out his senior year. Finley is passionate, creative, and extremely intelligent. Finley wasn't always a thief, but the worst in his life brings out the best in him. Did I forget to feed Edison? Finley thinks to himself. Edison is his pet goldfish, who spends his days in a sphere on Finley's nightstand. Finley's hamster died in a freak vacuum accident when he was in kindergarten, and since then, he was against pets. Edison was a prize Finley had reluctantly won at a carnival. So far, he's lasted over a year and tripled in size. Finley tugs nervously at his Iron Maiden shirt as he passes a cop. He checks his speed and cautiously pulls the seatbelt over his chest and clicks it into place. He thinks, "Don't pull me over, please." He isn't ready to deal with the police. He hasn't thought this far ahead. The officer turns left and into a gas station. Finley sighs, relief, and looks back at where the radio should be. It's too quiet for him. His thoughts float carelessly through his head. He pictures himself as a police officer for a moment and laughs at the thought. If his dad was around, or if his mother stopped drinking, if his brother never beat him, and if he stayed in school. He wondered where his life would have been then. What kind of person he would be now. An outstanding citizen, he imagines, with a wife and kids. He creates the vision of his family in his head. A woman with large breasts and red hair. 2 kids, 1 boy and 1 girl, with toothless smiles on their dirty faces. They would be soccer players, like Finley was, and always outside. He shakes off the thought. Sucks not having a radio, he thinks. He sits up taller in the driver's seat and lets out a little scream. Ah! He relaxes and slumps back into his seat. He tries to whistle and fails, only allowing air to escape his pursed lips. He blows a tune through his teeth and grunts in frustration. I wish I knew how to whistle. Both my parents could. Even Franklin can, he says in his head. He tries again, and a small tweet of a sound flies from in between his lips. He grins at his small accomplishment. I hate tuna fish, he thinks. Finley starts to space out behind the wheel. The lack of sound tricks his brain. He visualizes a concert he went to last year. He remembers all the pockets he picked and wallets he stole. He made 5 times the amount of the cost of the tickets he paid for, but wasn't able to enjoy the concert properly. The songs of the band echoes throughout his mind. He taps the steering wheel to the beat of the song stuck in his head. He hums the melody. He looked back at the center console and sighed loudly. There wasn't even a clock. What time is it? He wondered. I should have stolen a watch. Or a car with a radio. The car was quiet. Even the purr of the engine was hushed. Everything is still, except the thoughts in Finley's head. He thinks about the graduation he never attended, the smell of his last girlfriend right before she walked out the door, the taste of sea salt ice cream and how it was superior to any other flavor. He pictures the last family photo they had together when times were good. How Franklin had his arm around him in a rare, loving embrace. It is loud in Finley's head, and there is no sound to hide behind. He groans and tries to shake off all his thoughts, clear his head. It's no use. The thoughts always come back, stronger and louder than before. He is going mad from the silence. I can pull the steering wheel. It would be easy to wreck such a nice car. The guardrail teases Finley. He envisions the crash in his head and plays out the scene slowly. The metal twisted around the body of the convertible, the popped wheel and broken windshield. He shakes off the thought and continues driving, now upset by the concept he created in his mind. He can't distract himself from himself. There was nothing to drown out his perception of his own ideations. He can't clear his head. He's trapped within himself. Finley screams and pulls the car over. The wheels spin angrily against the dirt on the shoulder. He bangs the steering wheel with a fist and groans. He hears the sound of sirens and looks in the mirror. He didn't notice the police officer that pulled a U-turn at the last intersection. He didn't see the car behind him getting closer and closer. He watches as a police officer steps out of his squad car and aims a gun at his Corvette. Now what? This isn't part of his plan. He licks his lips and glares at his new challenge. He throws the car into drive and slams on the gas pedal. The car lurches forward and spins wildly back on the road. The cop calls it in and drives after Finley. The two-lane road was barren. The twists and turns makes Finley feel he was back on a roller coaster without the strangers. The contents of his stomach sloshes around. Well, this is great. He wanders ahead, trying to come up with a plan. He didn't know these streets that well, and another police car pulls up alongside Finley. He kicks up the speed and lets out a yelp as the car responds. They race down the street. The sirens blare loudly. Finley watches as the police cars serve and drive around each other like synchronized swimmers after him. These guys are good, but not as good as me. I need to lose them. He thinks about car chase videos he's watched online and in movies. The bad guy always gets caught somehow, with some small mistake he plans to avoid. He turns down a dirt road quickly, but the cars behind don't falter and follow him. The dirt is slick on the wheels, and with the sharp turn, he flips the car. He curses himself as the car rolls into the ditch upside down. The sound of scrapping metal pierces his ears. It's quiet for a moment as the dust settles. He wasn't going to get caught. Especially now, they will find out exactly how many people he's robbed. He isn't planning on going to jail. Edison would miss him. "Step out of the vehicle with your hands in the air," the officer shouts, spit flying out of his mouth. They were behind open car doors, ready for Finley to react. Finley's heart races as his hands went for the unloaded gun. "You'll never take me alive, coppers," he shouts in his mind. He smiles. He was on the track and field team in high school. Surely he could outrun the police. He's done it before, with success. He pushes the car door open, and without thinking, Finley hops out the car and runs, pointing the gun behind him. His feet slip on the loose gravel, but he collects himself and moves his feet fast underneath him. He takes 3 more steps away from the police, gun heavy in his hands. Bang! The silence is deafening. Just when you think all the weird stuff has been told, the next story will make you think again. They're coming. They're coming. The whispers carried by the wind. The repeat of words started yesterday morning, from the moment my bare feet touched the wooden planks of the wrapped-around porch. The corn swayed slowly. Anticipation, knowing they would soon pick up their speed. Sounds of the horses shifting around the fields, anxiety fueling them. They knew just as well as I did what was to come. The clouds in the distance were dense. The light around the house shined bright for now. The blanket of clouds would take that away. Soon, too soon. The pitter-patter of little feet sounded from behind me. A hand wrapping around my finger, giving a slight tug. Her bright blue eyes would be boring into me. Those beautiful eyes she adopted from her father. If only he was here, they wouldn't be coming. They would leave us be. They would keep their distance. They knew what the consequences were, but no contact, no letters, no information of where he was or when he would come home. Left us in the foreboding shadows. The war was bound to come. Unfortunately, we knew that. The day the papers came, he looked at me. The look of knowing all too well. He would be called upon, leaving us to fend for ourselves, while he went God knows where, to defend the great land we call home. The last letter received was over a month ago now. We sent one in return within the week. Concerns the officers would come bringing devastating news filled the house, weighing the air down. Another tug released me from my trance. I looked down, mustering a smile as best I could. Guiding her back into the house, setting her up in the chair for breakfast. Eggs, toast, and fresh bacon from one of the sows lay in front of her. Coffee was the choice for me. Hunger was gone. I felt nothing of the sorts. Thirst controlled me. Coffee, water, and milk satisfied me for the time being. A bang sounded outside. My eyes snapped to see through the fogged window from grime. Something else to add to my list of things to do. The dust and dirt picking up from the fields created a layer. A goat was taking time to practice butting again, lining up to go again with one of the poles surrounding them. The clouds were closer. Too much to do before they would be here. Too little time. Another tug. This time, my dress. I felt the hole in the side tear a little bit more. Another thing to fix around this place. I turned. Her shoes were on her feet, and mine were in her hands. The plate behind her was polished off, and the cup with remnants of milk sat beside it. Her head cocked to the side. A nod returned. Sliding my feet into my boots, we headed out to accomplish the never-ending tasks plaguing us. Night fell quickly, and the clouds were almost here. By morning, they would be on top of us. The sounds of the restless animals in the barn through the open window next to my bed, creaks of the old house moving with the wind, called out in various parts, the nerves, the knowing of what's coming, getting to me, all while she slept peacefully in her bed. No worries in the world, aside from making sure the animals were happy, and her father was okay. The adolescent hopes and dreams occupying her mind. Mine was screaming at me. Too many thoughts, too many fears, all flicking through, ready to explode out. The hope of tea helping the pain and pressure, all while it did nothing at all. It usually did not. But I lived by it, as my mother had too. Lessons she taught me, guided me quite frequently. That being just one of them. They're coming. I shuddered with the wind as it brought that news. Constant reminders. I wanted to scream out. I know all too well. Instead, I stayed quiet, fighting to go to sleep to earn some peace. Peace would not come, however. My dreams would be filled with thoughts of them coming. My husband, my child not getting everything they need. The idea of peace is just that. An idea, a hope. There was none for me. The sounds were pounding by the time my eyes opened. Light barely came through the windows. The clouds were here, and so was the shadow. My feet pounded, carrying me out onto the porch. The corn stalks now looked like they were laying down, the wind rearing its ugly face. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. The words pounded into me. My eyes watered, dirt flying into them. I felt my way to the sink, rinsing them out as best I could. Turning, she was behind me again, head cocked to the side. Quickly fixing oatmeal, she ate while I worried. Opting to give her time off today, I set her up with her favorite things in the living room. Not before getting her dressed in her Sunday best. No hair out of place, and a bow matching her shoes. The wind howled outside. They're coming, quickly. I needed to get everything done, quickly. Forgetting my shoes, I headed to the barn, multitasking, not without dropping things. The grime now covered me, just as it did the windows. Hurry. You must hurry. Stepping out of the barn, a cloud of dust was nearing. Pounding of horseshoes coming down the way, carried with the wind, just as the words did. They're coming. Minutes. A matter of minutes. And they would be here. The dust rounded the drive at the far end of the field. My feet ran me into the house and to the bathroom. Grabbing a cloth, I wet it down and scrubbed at my flesh. The grime coming off, slowly it felt. I was running out of time. Finally, getting the last mark off, I put my Sunday best on, running my fingers through my hair. Standing in the doorway, she was beside me, watching the cloud of dust get closer. They're coming. The wind howled again. They're coming. The above story has ended. Let's listen to the next story. Late for rest. This story centers around death. I'm late, she thought, as she ran for the bus. Her friends would say that was her life's motto. Amelia scrambled on the bus, trying not to jostle anyone. She had been given a final warning about not getting to work on time, and knew her boss was serious. She was good at her job. But this city had over 2 million people. She could be replaced. In fact, she was one of many autopsy technicians who were employed at her job. She enjoyed working with her colleagues and liked working under her supervisor. The problem was, on top of being a natural procrastinator, she was in school full-time while working full-time. But this was her last semester. Her goal was to become an ME. She had always been interested in true crime as a kid and spent her free time watching the ID channel. Her first interest was in forensic science because she wanted to investigate crime scenes. But death and dead bodies never bothered her, and she started working in the morgue as an undergrad, which spurred her interest in forensic pathology. It was then that she learned she was gifted in reading corpses. All those years of hearing about petechiae, cyanosis, and lividity became useful. She could read bodies like a book. That, combined with her proclivity for stockpiling information about diseases and murder, made her a veritable glossary of forensic pathology. Amelia was well liked at work because she was knowledgeable and friendly. Plus, she had a great work ethic while at work. It was outside of work that she struggled with procrastination. She just struggled to stay focused. If she had an assignment to do that required research, she'd end up going down rabbit holes on a side topic that caught her eye. She would know it's time to stop. But if a deadline wasn't impending, she knew she could get away with pushing something off in favor of exploring her current interest. This habit is what created such a wealth of knowledge for her. Unfortunately, it also made her have to do everything last minute or even late. Since becoming an adult and responsible for her own finances, she has never filed her taxes on time. 2 years in a row, she forgot altogether. To compensate, Amelia didn't get much sleep and often slept through her alarms. It was probably her body and brain's way to ensure she got enough sleep. Her boss didn't care how good of a worker she was if she continuously showed up late. She understood that, yet she still struggled to alter her habits. On top of that, she couldn't stay late because of her grad research. She had a thesis to finish and defend. Amelia lived in a state of guilt and shame over not being better at time management, but figured she'd have time to learn how to get better at it later. Today, it was important to not be late. there was still a possibility of making it on time. She missed her first bus, but ran full speed 6 blocks to catch a different one. She had a chance to rest before her stop, and then she'd have to sprint again for the light rail. It was a tight plan, requiring more physical exertion than she was used to, especially outside in Houston in the summer. But it was better to turn up drenched in sweat than late. For once, Amelia made it to work on time. And surprisingly, she wasn't sweating or even tired. Smiling to herself, she walked into the lab, expecting a few comments razzing her for unusual timeliness. However, everyone looked stern. This wasn't unusual in a morgue where many unfortunate events cause bodies to end up here. It was especially hard when it was a child or a victim of a violent assault. Or worse, a child who was a victim of a violent assault. Occasionally, a friend or relative of one of her colleagues came through. Everyone was very professional, but an underlying awkwardness was always present. Amelia approached the body they were centered around. She looked down at herself. Shock doesn't begin to describe what she felt. Confusion, of course, was also a dominant reaction. Was this a prank? The level of cruelty involved in doing something like this as a prank was beyond her comprehension. "What the fuck?" she yelled. For once, she was not late. And this is how they treat her. No one turned to look at her or even responded. "How the fuck did you do this?" Doubt started to flood in. She grew up in the foster system. Did she have a sister she didn't know about? Did she have a twin? "Who is this?" she yelled as her frustration and fear grew. Still, no one met her eye or replied. "When did she arrive?" her colleague Nate asked. "Half an hour ago," Mike, her supervisor, replied. For once, she was early. "What the actual fuck, guys?" "You are going too far," she screamed. She liked these people. How could they be so cruel? Was this supposed to be some kind of lesson for her extreme tardiness? Like an extreme example of what could happen if she continued living her life always running late. Ironically, I believe she was hit by a bus while she was running for a different one, Mike suggested. "Wow, death by bus," Angela quipped. "This is sick. It's not funny. Who is this?" she cried. Mike stepped back right into her, literally into her. It was slowly dawning on Amelia that this wasn't a prank. She looked down at the corpse that was obviously hers. She was dead. She was hit by a bus. It was unfathomable, but she still had a lot to do. "I don't think there is a need for an autopsy," Mike announced. Slowly, everyone turned away, and Amelia took the chance to step closer to her body. "Wait," she exclaimed. No one listened. Amelia remembered her last moments. She had gotten in an argument with a man near the bus stop. His attempt at catcalling was graphic and disturbing, and she told him, "Shut the fuck up, creep." He retorted with a comment suggesting she needed to be raped. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Amelia demanded. "You're an uptight bitch who needs a good dicking down, whether you want one or not," he replied. "I don't have time for this," she mumbled to herself while looking around for help. She saw a cop car across the street and started to head that way. She had to pause because a bus was rapidly approaching her stop. The last thing she remembers is being pushed. "This was not an accident," she yelled at her colleagues. Desperation set in as she realized this would be recorded as an accident instead of the murder it was. Legally, it was probably manslaughter, but when you're the one killed, you feel murdered, not manslaughtered. Her colleagues continued to go about their business as Mike filled out the paperwork. "Please look again, Mike," she said as she peered over his shoulder. She watched him type the details, or her death, which she found the most surreal event of the day. "Please," she whispered again, before going to look at her body for evidence that she had been pushed. She needed someone to turn herself over. She even reached out herself, but in her non-corporeal state, there was nothing she could do. She cried tearlessly as she lost hope. "I feel we should do something more for Amelia," Angela said. "Like plan her funeral," Mike suggested. She had no family. "I was thinking more along the lines of an autopsy," she offered. "Amelia would have wanted one." It's true. Even if she hadn't suspected an attack, she still would want an autopsy. She had already planned for her body to be donated to the body farm when she died. She had lived a life of science and wanted to continue in death. "You're right," Mike said. Before getting up, he changed the paperwork to justify an autopsy. Amelia waited as patiently as she could until it happened. Her body was finally rolled over, and there were marks indicating that she wasn't just pushed, but punched in the back with 2 fists. "Holy shit," Angela remarked. Stunned, the whole team began discussing possibilities as Amelia felt herself being pulled away. "No, I don't want to go," she cried. This would be the final rabbit hole she'd ever go down, and the most important one to her. She fought against this invisible force, tugging her away, because her interest was piqued. She had to know that they solved this crime. The cops needed to know to look at security cameras so they could find this guy. She physically felt like she was in a game of tug of war, with her soul being the middle of the rope. Finally, one last tug pulled her away. There's at least one place she could. The next story will begin now. The unwritten pages. 37 minutes after getting off the Route 19 bus, Bronwyn Miller realized her mistake. The familiar weight against her hip had disappeared because her leather-bound diary, which was her 3-year companion, wasn't there. Her fingers instinctively searched for the familiar worn cover, but discovered just the empty pocket of her oversized cardigan. She abruptly paused on the sidewalk while whispering, "No, no, no," mentally retracing her steps. The last places she visited before reaching the current sidewalk included the coffee shop and the bus stop, followed by the bus ride. She remembered having her diary at the bus stop with her, where she wrote during every wait because it had become her routine. The diary wasn't just any journal. The diary held all her unfiltered thoughts and secrets for 3 years, which she never expressed out loud. This was Bronwyn in her true form, without her deliberate public image. She started running back toward the bus stop, which was 6 blocks away. How likely was it for her diary to remain undisturbed on that bench in a city of 4 million, 0, as it turned out? An elderly woman sat on the bench and fed pigeons, while no leather-bound book appeared in sight. She knew that it was gone and felt a strange emptiness inside. Bronwyn reached the point of thinking the situation wasn't as terrible after 3 days passed. Someone had probably thrown it away. Bronwyn confirmed the transit authority had no records of anyone turning in her diary. Then came the notification. Bronwyn received a phone notification while she was working. A new email with the subject line, "I think this belongs to you?" A link represented the entire email, which lacked any other content. Upon clicking on the link, a basic blog titled "Pages Found" appeared on the web page, showing its first post created earlier that morning. Sometimes I wonder if anyone would notice if I disappeared. Mom would, obviously. But would she be sad or just inconvenienced? She spent so many years being disappointed in me that maybe it would be a relief. I think about disappearing a lot lately. Not dying, just vanishing. Starting over somewhere. No one knows the Bronwyn who always messes up. Her heart stopped. She'd written those words just last week, following her argument with her mother. The words matched exactly with her diary entries, which she had written by hand. As she scrolled through the page, she discovered 3 new entries, which contained her personal reflections written during the past month. The content hasn't reached extreme damage yet, but it's personal enough to make her feel exposed. At the bottom of the page was a comment box, and above it, a message. Bronwyn, if you're reading this, comment here. We need to talk about what you wrote on your remaining pages. She didn't sleep that night. She kept refreshing the blog compulsively while watching another entry show up. I had that dream again, where I'm giving my presentation and realize I'm completely naked. Dr. Winters says it's about vulnerability, about my fear of being exposed. How ironic is that? I pay someone $200 an hour to to tell me I'm afraid of people seeing who I really am. Maybe she's right, though. I've spent so much energy crafting this competent, put-together version of myself. What would happen if people saw the real mess underneath? After hours of intense deliberation, Bronwyn typed the words. "This is private. Please stop posting my words. What do you want?" The response came within minutes. "Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m. The bus stop where you left it." Bronwyn arrived at 2:45, her hands shaking. Before going to the meeting, she instructed Martha about her location and insisted that Martha call the authorities if she failed to report back by 3:30. At exactly 3 o'clock, her phone buzzed with another link. "I see you, Bronwyn. I've been watching you for a while now, even before I found your diary. You take this bus every Tuesday and Thursday. Look to your left, at the cafe across the street." Through the cafe window, she could see a figure holding up what appeared to be her diary. Her heart raced as she stood at the curb, until a gap in the traffic opened for her to cross. Bronwyn identified the figure sitting at the window table as she walked closer. "Eliza," she said in disbelief. Bronwyn's quiet marketing co-worker, Eliza Chen, sat down reading Bronwyn's diary. "Why?" was all Bronwyn could manage. Eliza pushed the diary toward her. "I found it. I opened it to find out whose it was. And once I realized it was yours, I should have just returned it. But then I read a bit more." She paused. "You wrote about feeling invisible, about no one really seeing you. So you tracked me down to publish my personal feelings on the internet?" Bronwyn hissed. Her face flushed as she confessed that she knew what she did was wrong. "But I recognized myself in your words. That feeling of being invisible, together with the necessity to hide behind a facade. My intention was to demonstrate that someone truly saw you and listened to what you said." "You thought what? That I'd be grateful?" Bronwyn snatched up her diary and held it close against her body. Eliza didn't know what thoughts she had and looked down. "I've taken the blog down. All the posts are deleted. Your words made me feel connected to you. My whole life, I've felt as though no one would even realize I was gone." "What you did was a violation," Bronwyn stated firmly. "You had no right." "I know. I'm sorry." Eliza spoke once more when Bronwyn began to walk away. "There's something else you should know. On page 43, you stated that you haven't encountered anyone who truly understood your feelings. That's not true, Bronwyn. You're not alone. That doesn't make what you did okay." "I know," Eliza said quietly. Bronwyn opened her diary to a blank page and started to write as she walked towards the bus stop. "Today, I encountered the person who discovered my diary. I discovered that it was Eliza from work who found my diary, rather than a creepy stranger. Eliza expressed her connection with me through the words I wrote. I remain angry yet feel uneasy about how someone who barely existed to me understood me so well. Eliza mentioned my writing. "You possess exceptional writing skills," she remarked. This memory took me back to my creative writing professor during my sophomore year, before I changed my major to business, because my father considered business more practical. These pages represent the sole place where I've openly revealed my desire to write a novel. A week later, Bronwyn found a sealed envelope on her desk with a handwritten note. "I understand if you decide never to speak to me again. If you ever do, I must inform you that I have begun writing too." Putting the invisible parts on paper sometimes helps people understand them better. That evening, she flipped to page 43 of her diary. "I question whether there exists another person who experiences this same sensation of ghosting through their own existence. At times I feel I could yell in a packed space without anyone listening to me." On Monday, Bronwyn took her usual bus. Eliza occupied the back seat as she wrote notes into her little notebook. Their eyes met briefly before Eliza quickly looked down. Bronwyn took the vacant seat next to Eliza. "I got your note. I was sincere when I apologized," Eliza answered, with a voice so faint it was nearly inaudible. "What are you writing?" Bronwyn asked. "Just thoughts. Nothing as eloquent as your words. Your words reveal things that otherwise stay hidden," Eliza resumed. "Reading your diary felt as though someone had expressed my inner emotions in words." Bronwyn acknowledged that her actions were still wrong, while showing less anger. "I know. After discovering your diary, I started writing my thoughts down myself. The act of writing my thoughts down became helpful after I read your January entry. Writing feels like breathing underwater because you discover air in an environment meant to choke you. Yes, your diary entries reminded me of your desire to write a novel one day. This story is about all the characters you've been imagining since childhood." Bronwyn felt her face flush. Those were private dreams she'd almost forgotten. Eliza said softly, "You know that you can do it. Your diary entries read like literature already." The bus came to a halt at its regular destination for Bronwyn. She decided to remain seated instead of exiting as the bus started moving. 6 months later, Bronwyn sat across from Eliza at their regular cafe table by the window, the same table where they'd had their confrontation. Bronwyn declared, "I finished it," while pushing the manuscript toward Eliza across the table. "All thanks to you." Eliza picked up the stack of papers, reading the title page. "The Unwritten Pages" by Bronwyn Miller. Their initial coffee meetings, which started cautiously, developed into both a genuine friendship and a creative partnership. They gathered every Tuesday evening to write, with Bronwyn working on her novel while Eliza focused on poetry. Bronwyn announced, after taking a sip of her coffee, that she planned to send her manuscript to the literary agent they met at the writer's workshop. Eliza remarked on the strange way things come together. The moment that brought us together happened because you left your diary on the bus stop. Bronwyn joined in with a playful grin, saying, "You were such a creepy stalker." I prefer to think of myself as the universe's extremely flawed messenger. Eliza's expression grew serious. "What drove me to give you back your diary was something you'd written about your dream to write a novel, but your fear that no one would want to hear your voice. Your diary entry revealed your dream of becoming an author, yet your fear held you back. I came to understand that I was reading the thoughts of an individual who possessed valuable insights, but doubted anyone would listen to them. That night, Bronwyn opened her original diary and flipped to the last page where she started writing a new entry following her confrontation with Eliza. She went back to read her thoughts from 6 months prior. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her, but today I understood something. The experience of being truly seen can evoke simultaneous feelings of fear and awe. Beneath those words, Bronwyn added, "Today, I finished my novel." Sometimes, the worst moments in our lives become doorways to the best ones. Sometimes, a stranger becomes the friend who helps you find your voice. And sometimes, being seen is exactly what you needed all along. She shut the diary softly because she was no longer fearful of its contents or the consequences of someone reading them. The words had served their purpose. They had guided her home to herself. We think it's over, but in fact, it's just begun. The next story will thrill you in a completely different way. The quiet before. I bent low over the painting, the tip of my brush dotting at the corner of the landscape. It was just a tree, after all, but the spot of varnish that had welled up and discolored over the years needed to be removed. When the acetone leached into the surface, it peeled back, and my heart clenched. As the varnish removed a layer of paint, it revealed a subtle, dark patch of pigment beneath its surface. I sat back, a chill running through me. Underpainting. Maybe a hidden painting? I held my breath and stripped off my rubber gloves as I leaned back from the canvas. The visible image was a simple landscape, rolling hills and a few meandering roads, the colors muted by age and dust. The sky was a washed-out blue, and the trees on the horizon seemed too far off to be of much importance. It was nothing special, but that was never the point. What mattered now was finding out what lay beneath. I put on fresh gloves and lifted the painting with care. The canvas felt heavier than it should have, and I walked slowly over to the imaging lab. I positioned it carefully on the table, making sure that it was level before placing the X-ray scanner above the canvas. The machine hummed to life, and I stepped back to the desk as the images slowly appeared on the screen. Beneath the visible landscape, buried under layers of thick, muddled paint, was a face. It was likely a woman. as I could see brushstrokes of long hair curling around her face beneath the layers. The image was ghostly, faint, and slightly blurred, but unmistakable. A portrait. The faint outline of her features, her eyes staring somewhere just beyond the frame, sent a shiver through me. She was there, just beneath the surface. I didn't need to look at the X-ray again. I'd seen enough. I grabbed my phone and quickly searched for the artist's name. It was barely anything, just some obscure mentions in art journals, but something about it felt wrong. There had to be more. I spent the next few days buried in the archives. The museum had extensive access to resources on all sorts of artists, but the painting's creator remained elusive. There was nothing concrete about him, just scraps of details on a man who seemed as obscure in life as he was in death. The painting, this painting, felt like a living thing, pulling me deeper into its mystery, one layer at a time. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how much there was to discover. As I attempted to track down her creator, I peeled back the landscape layer by layer, revealing the portrait of a strange, haunting woman. Her pale face was framed by dark, flowing hair that reached her shoulders. Her gaze was distinct, distant, yet her features soft, as though she's looking at something or someone beyond my reach. There was a haunting grace, a quiet calm to her, but an unsettling depth in her eyes. The light in the portrait was soft and diffused, casting a faint glow on her skin and creating gentle shadows under her cheekbones, giving her face an almost ethereal quality. She sat as though she is regal, with a slender curve to her neck, though her pose was rigid and upright. Her gown looked heavy and richly textured, and almost blurred into the darker background. I found myself losing time, focus, and all sense of responsibility to this woman. Time had started to slip away in ways I couldn't explain. Days melted into one another, the world around me a blur as I spent more time with her. But no matter how much I uncovered, there was always a feeling that I was just scratching the surface. I pulled the stack of archived files towards me and sighed, taking another sip of the peach energy drink I'd come to rely on during these long stints of hunting down the elusive painter of the hidden woman. I'd discovered his name was Luigi Diovina. But beyond that, there were mere snippets of his life. An article about his madness toward the end of his life, and a lost last painting commissioned for a baroness. That article had sent a shiver up my spine. Could this be that painting? If so, I'd found a hidden treasure, but the baroness remained unnamed. leaving me with no way to verify who she was. I leaned back in the chair, my eyes falling once more on the image of the woman. I hadn't been able to stop thinking about her. I wasn't the only one noticing the strain. Clara, Jenna, a senior restorer, pulled me aside. "You've got to get back to the other works. The other paintings are falling behind. Victor has been asking about the St. Catherine piece. The museum's losing patience." I nodded, though I couldn't shake my growing unease. "I'll catch up," I murmured, but even I didn't believe it. I couldn't focus on anything else. The painting, the Baroness had started to call her, had started to become the only thing I could focus on. Even when I tried, I found myself returning to the painting, as if it were calling to me. The woman's eyes seemed to follow me wherever I went. The deeper I investigated her, the more she began to consume my thoughts, my every waking moment. The article had come from a dusty file in the back of the local library, one that had been buried on microfiche and stuffed away in a back room somewhere. I'd had to bribe the front desk worker with a box of donuts and a large coffee, so she'd dig it out for me. But once I'd scrolled through 3 years' worth of articles on local auctions, I finally struck pay dirt. Haunted painting sells at auction. Deadly Baroness's portrait said to haunt Diavina's last known work, the headline read, giving much more detail than any other piece ever had. Though the Baroness was still unnamed, the full article mentioned the painter's dying days. Diavina's obsession with his final portrait left him a shadow of the man he once was. Those who knew him said he would often stand in front of the canvas, seemingly lost to time, as though the woman's eyes spoke to him. In his last weeks, it was rumored he painted over the face of the woman. This had to be the painting, but how had it ended up in our archives? Why had he painted over her face? The deeper I uncovered the painting, the more I believed that the woman, her secrets, were pulling me into a vortex of obsession, just as they had Diavina. Clara. My head jerked up, the soft brush in my hand. The Baroness's eyes were inches from mine, her creamy skin slowly being cleaned at my skillful hands. I blinked and sat back, gazing around the room for the source of my name. But no one was around. The office was strangely empty. I stretched my back, leaning slightly over the chair, and stood up to walk down the hall. Empty. And it was dark. Curious, I walked a few steps towards the archives room. "Clara!" I whipped around. No one was there, but the voice had come from my office. I rushed back in, but found only the Baroness staring at me. Why were her eyes fixed on me? Her gaze had moved. Her eyes seemed to be fixed on me, just as obsessed with me as I was with her. As I stepped around the stacks of files, my tools, and other paintings I'd neglected in favor of the Baroness. Her eyes followed me around the room. I slowly sat down on the stool I'd left in front of her, sitting eye to eye with her. It was only us in the room, no one else. The next day, I gazed around Vincent's office as he sat in front of me. His arms were crossed over his chest, and the furrow in his brow only deepened as he watched me fidgeting. "Clara," he said, catching my attention. I glanced up quickly, my eyes locking on his face. "I understand that you're passionate about the restoration, but we're running a museum, not a one-woman project. You've been neglecting the other pieces for weeks now. You know how important the St. Catherine piece is. If it isn't ready by the next exhibition, I'll get to it," I said, cutting him off. I blinked rapidly. The St. Catherine piece was complex, but it was just a cleaning job, and since I didn't need to paint anything, I'd be able to finish it quickly. "Clara?" My eyes widened as the familiar, haunting voice called my name. "Do you realize how much time you've spent on this?" Vincent paused, his eyes narrowing as he searched for the right words. "This obsession? Don't ignore me." I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers to my forehead. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I'll get it done. I just need a little more time." Vincent let out a frustrated sigh, his hands running through his hair. "I need you to refocus. We can't afford this. Not with the exhibit coming up." "Clara!" My head snapped up, but it was just me and Vincent in the room. I glanced down, my heart pounding. His hands were strained, the same rusty red as the Baroness's dress, the splotches covering his fingers and seeping into his nail beds. "Clara," Vincent said sternly, though his voice was also tinged with worry. "You're letting everything else slip." He flicked through his computer and turned it to me, his stained fingers showing CCTV footage of the archives. And, "Is that me?" I asked, gazing at the screen. "Yes. You stood there for an hour like that, Clara. And this is at..." His voice trailed off as he checked the timestamp. His face grew increasingly lined with worry. "The point is, you haven't been yourself. You look like you haven't slept in days, Clara. This isn't you. Go home. Get some rest," he said, sighing as he adjusted the screen back to normal. I stood, and without hesitating, I left his office. "And don't do anything with that painting," he called as I stalked out. But it was calling me. She was calling me. I glanced into the studio from the sliver of a window in the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see a distorted view of the painting sitting on an easel at my workstation. I could see her outline, the delicate slope of her neck, and the blood red of her robes. Suddenly, a shadowy figure moved across the threshold of my door, and I jumped back, startled. I hesitated, struck by fear. Not that someone had broken into my office, but that someone was going to take the Baroness from me. I turned the doorknob, but of course, I'd locked it, and I could see her right there. She was right there. A chill swept through me, and I shivered, closing my eyes as I dropped my hand from the door. When I got home, I was a little shocked to see Ethan on the couch, anxiously texting people. "You're home?" I said, dropping my keys and messenger bag by the door and taking off my coat. He gazed up at me and tilted his head. "You're home," he said worriedly. There was no warmth to his voice, as if he was put out with me. I furrowed my brow. "Yeah, Vincent sent me home early, said I looked tired." "What, early?" "It's 9 p.m., Clara," Ethan said, putting his phone down. I blinked and looked out the window, my stomach clenching. He stood up, moving over to me as he noted the look of confusion on my face. "What's going on, Clara?" he asked quietly. He reached out to rest his hand on the small of my back, but I pulled away, a feeling of overwhelming anxiety rolling through me. "Nothing. I can't." I shook my head and then glanced up at him. "I can't remember what I did. Vincent sent me home at 11?" I said, my stomach twisting again. I leaned into the kitchen counter, holding it tightly. Ethan looked shocked, his lips parting to calculate the math. "Okay, it's fine. We'll figure it out. You've just been stressed with the exhibition coming up, and all the work," he said, rubbing my back gently. I shook my head, reaching for my bag and rifling through it. My fingers crossed over something gold and metallic. I furrowed my brow and pulled out the ring of archive keys. It jingled in my hand, and I closed my eyes, shaking my head. "Why do you—" Ethan began, but I cut him off. "I must have just shoved them in my bag. It's fine," I said, taking a deep breath. I put the keys gently back into my bag and took out my phone again, checking the time. "It's late. I'm late. I came home late. I'm just tired," I said slowly, rationalizing things to myself. "Okay, do you want to just call it a night? Get some rest? Maybe a shower?" Ethan asked. I saw his nose crinkle from the corner of my eye. Did I stink? My jaw twitched as I bit my cheek. "Yeah?" I nodded, but couldn't help the feeling that Diavina's Baroness had something to do with the loss of time. I closed my eyes, and Ethan brushed my hair back from my face. "Okay," I said, pulling away from him. He looked sad, but didn't move towards me as I stalked off to our bedroom, my phone held loosely in my fist. I stepped into the hallway leading to our bedroom, the light from the kitchen spilling across the dark-toned wood behind me. As I stepped towards the darkened bedroom, I felt adrift, and my head felt heavy. I stopped at the doorway and lifted my head. My fingers paused on the light switch. The room glowed with the dull orange light from the street lamp that streamed through the curtains. It made for an eerie sort of atmosphere. But that's not why I paused. My eyes were locked on the full-length mirror across the room from me. Its glassy surface should reflect only the bed, maybe the edge of my body, not the full shadow that stood ominously facing me. I blinked, frozen in place as I stared at the shadow. It almost pulsated, its shoulders hunched. It wasn't exactly shapeless, but it didn't have any defining features. Still, it felt familiar in a way it shouldn't have been. My fingers twitched, brushing the edge of the light switch. I took a shaky breath. I flipped the switch, and the figure was gone as soon as light flooded the room. The mirror was empty. My chest clenched painfully, and I leaned against the doorframe. Slowly, I flicked the light again. There she was, dominating the mirror, a black mass. But I knew her. I knew who she was. I flicked the light on again, and she was gone. But just as quickly, I flicked it off, and she was there. Panic rose like a bile in my throat. Distantly, as if underwater, I could hear Ethan calling to me, but his words were lost. Because the Baroness was calling me, her voice was rising in a screaming ring in my ears. I trembled with fear as I stepped towards the mirror, towards her. My mind fought my body as deep, panicky breaths burst from my chest. As I stepped up to the mirror, the shadow swelled and blossomed, the shrill screams rising to fever pitch in my ears. A hand wrapped around my shoulder just as the mirror shattered. It's with great pleasure that we present the final restored work of Luciano Diovina, the Baroness. Its beauty belies its tragic past, and we are proud to display it as a memorial to our departed co-worker. Vincent held the champagne glass aloft, then took a sip and stepped down from the podium. Beside him, the Baroness had been artfully restored, her colors vibrant, her skin creamy, her robes deep and gory slash of blood red. She looked almost youthful, brought back to life at Clara's skilled hands. It's a shame. An older woman stands next to a younger one, both eyeing the Baroness and the in memoriam plaque that had been hung next to her frame. The younger one nods, glancing nervously at the portrait. It's tragic. But did you hear about what happened with her boyfriend? I mean, the portrait, sure, it's gorgeous, but I heard it was bad. They glance at the painting. Like gruesome. Like she was obsessed? They cut off, clearly unsure how much to say. The older co-worker's voice drops even lower. Obsessed doesn't even cover it. But you didn't hear it from me. It's a horrible end, though. They each sip their champagne, the younger one shivering as if she said too much. The older glances down at her watch. Come on. The presentation. We're late. Master of Puppets. Io sono il padrone, e tu sei il burattino. I am the master, and you are the puppet. Working in an antique store was hardly where Aislinn saw herself 5 years ago. But beggars couldn't be choosers in this economy. Her dreams of becoming someone had been crushed by the reality of life and the collapse of her support system after college. And she depended on this job to make ends meet. Still, something was charming about the Raven's wares, even if she did encounter some characters from time to time. Her cousin often asked her if she had ever felt spirits or weird energy working around the real skulls, the old Victorian dolls, or the taxidermy of the Raven that gave the store its name. Like everyone in the town, Aislinn had heard horror stories about the objects sold from this place. A man bought a doll for his daughter, and they all vanished without a trace a week later. A woman bought a pretty ring and died in a freak accident with the ring on her finger. Someone bought an old statue and fell down their stairs. The truth was, Aislinn didn't believe in those sorts of things. Ghosts, ghouls, or energies. Sure, the place was creepy if you worked late alone on long winter nights, but it paid the bills. Those horror stories were coincidences. Plenty of people had purchased items from the Raven's wrath without an issue. Her cousin believed in that side of things so strongly. People whispered about her behind their hands. If Aislinn started believing, what would they say about their family? It was bad enough she worked here. The customers you never heard about were outsiders. A tiny voice in her head would whisper when she had this argument with herself. You've never followed up to check on what happened afterwards. She looked up from her phone when Eli barged their way back through the piles of antique junk piled around the place. A guy dropped off this painting today. I'm telling you, it's weird. Aislinn knew that everything here was weird in one form or another. She once had someone try to offer a jar of real human teeth. That had been on her second day, and regrettably, it had not been her last strange experience. They jerked their thumb over their shoulder. It's out the back by the rocking horse. I need you to label it up before you leave tonight. Did he give any details? Nah, I'm surprised you didn't see him. Dark-haired guy, glasses, had some sort of accent. She vaguely recalled someone coming in of that description when she'd been restocking some old hardbacks and had directed him towards Eli at the back of the store. She wouldn't have thought of him again, save for the odd look in his dark eyes. I sent him to the back to see you. He had this look in his eyes, like he'd seen things, you know? I offered him a fair price, But he didn't even want the money. He just said to take it. He didn't want money? Aislinn repeated slowly. That's a bit weird, don't you think? Maybe it came with bad memories or something. Eli shrugged. Just make sure to get it cataloged to go out on display. I've got to head off. I'll see you tomorrow. The afternoon was quickly fading, the air becoming colder and far less welcoming inside. The eyes of the raven on the desk seemed to watch her every move, and the gentle ticking of the antique clocks suddenly felt ominous. Even the shadows of the shelves seemed to be lengthening, reaching out in her direction. Aislinn looked up from her book and paused. The store had fallen eerily silent. She felt her heartbeat increase as the hair at the back of her neck stood up. Hello? Why was she calling out? There was no one there. No one had entered the shop. The bell above the door had been silent for hours. A faint whisper seemed to be coming from the distance. Someone must have left the radio on in the storage room. She walked to the back of the store, trying to ignore the feeling that the eyes of the dolls were watching her. It wasn't like her to be this paranoid. She pushed the door open wide and reached in to grab the portable radio the manager insisted on keeping around. Her hand found the handle and lifted it out. It was switched off. Okay, she muttered, feeling a cold trickle of sweat run down her back. She set the radio down on an empty stool and worked away around the mountains of antiques to find the latest addition to the collection. Aislinn pulled the sheet off slowly and recoiled. The painting was of a hanging puppet, clearly based on the original Pinocchio story. It's dressed in traditional clothes against a gruesome backdrop of bones and the occasional skull. The entire thing was bordered by a swirling wine-red blood red. A shudder ran down her spine as she took in all the gruesome details. The glass on the front was cracked, but that was hardly anything they couldn't fix. There was something odd about the break, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She turned the painting over to check the back of the frame and noticed a faded name on the back, too illegible to read, and an unmistakable bloody handprint. What the hell? The painting clattered to the floor as she reeled back, banging into a cabinet and screaming as the puppet hanging there swung into her face. Its painted smile seemed twisted into a cruel leer as she swatted it away, clutching at her chest. She took some calming breaths. She picked the painting up from the floor with shaking hands and turned it over, aware of her heart racing in her chest. There's no bloody handprint, only the faded marks of a name. You're going mad, she muttered to herself. You need to get out more. She carried the painting to the desk and started cataloging it, intrigued by the lack of an artist's mark. Even a quick Google search yielded no results, and after a few minutes, she brought it back to sit at the back by the dolls and puppets. She took a moment longer to stare at it and turned back to the front. There was a rocking horse in the middle of the aisle. No, that wasn't possible. She hadn't moved anything. "Hello?" she called out nervously. "This isn't funny now. Come out." When no one answered, she tried to focus. Maybe it had been there before, and she had simply walked past it, not noticing. Eli had said the painting was out the back by the rocking horse. For a moment, her cousin's voice echoed in her ear. Though she tried to deny it, this was not the first time something like this had happened on her shift. Eli had laughed it off with her at the time, but she hadn't seen a bloody handprint last time. Eli had moved the horse. That's all there was to it. Aisling walked back to the front of the store and stared out at the street. Across at the ordinary sight of the small local shop and the dress shop beside it. Maybe she needed a holiday. The radio started playing a Cure song. Had she turned it on? When had she brought it to the front? Suddenly, the dark shop seemed alien to her. No, now she was being stupid. She didn't believe in any of that stuff. A sudden tiredness overcame her as she sat back in her chair and started to doze, watching the cuckoo bird on the antique clock swing backwards and forwards, swinging, swinging. She could hear the distant creaking sound of a rope and sobbing cries, growing louder and louder. Oh, how painful! How painful! Why wasn't I good? Something was hovering in the corner of her vision. Every instinct in her body screamed at her not to turn and look, to run away from that shadow. She turned her head and saw the puppet from the painting. It raised its head and leered at her. Puppets have no soul, but they do a lot of harm. Suddenly, she was the one battling with the rope as the puppet laughed and screeched over and over. "I want to be real. I want to be real. I want to be real." Aisling leapt up from her sleep, feeling the phantom rope around her throat. Every item in the shop was facing her. They seemed to be looming towards her, skulls echoing the cries of the horrific voice as it cried out over and over. Whatever sick joke this was, she wasn't playing anymore. She ran to the door and tried to haul it open. It was locked. The room seemed to darken, and the sound of the puppet's voice, distant at first, became unmistakable, growing clearer with each passing second. Its whispers now unmistakably directed at her. "Oh, che male, che male." She picked up a metal poker and walked to where the painting sat. The voice was louder now, its desperate cries in both English and Italian piercing her ears. "What the hell are you?" The voices paused. "You should let me out. You're just like me. You're a puppet too." Aisling lifted the metal poker above her head. "What are you?" "You should let me out, Aisling." She tried to move away, but her back smacked into a large cabinet. "What the hell are you?" My last puppet didn't obey. He brought me here. Un burattino che non obbedisce finisce sempre male. A puppet who does not obey always ends badly. You should let me out. I've always been here, waiting for someone to let me out. She realized then what was wrong with the glass. Something was trying to break free from the inside. her own reflection in the glass, warped into a puppet's face, and she felt the weight of something choking her. No, she was not a puppet. She was a human. This wasn't real. I am the master of puppets. Puppets have no soul, but they do a lot of harm. I tried to take his soul, but he broke free. You will let me out. You are my puppet now. You saw it in the glass. You're like me. Iceland watched in horror as the cracks in the glass grew wider. It will end badly for you if you do not obey. She lifted the poker to swing it, and the hands of the puppets on display reached out and grabbed her throat, pulling her backwards. A bad puppet is of no use to me. I have been waiting for you. There's nothing to be done. One must really die good. Iceland screamed, trying to throw the puppets off. She twisted in their grip, seeing the cracks grow wider and wider. When you're not real, nothing hurts, Iceland. But the more I try to be real, the more I feel pain. Oh, the pain. How painful this is. Can't you feel it? The creaking of the rope was unbearable. The spiraling voice wailing and wailing as she begged for this to stop, for her to wake up, to let this nightmare end. Iceland woke in her chair. The clock read the same time as it had before, but something was different. Everything was different. At some point, the gentle light of the afternoon had faded into a gray gloom bordering on darkness. This day seemed to be lasting an eternity. It was all a nightmare, a terrible nightmare. She saw it then. Her vision narrowed, and her chest tightened as she stared at it. The painting, mocking her from the back, as it always had. Maybe this was still a nightmare taken new form. Those horrible skulls leering at her, that noise, that endless noise. She approached it slowly and ran her hands over the cracks in the glass, feeling her skin crawl with revulsion. The glass was cold, unnaturally cold, like it was sucking the little warmth she had left from her fingers. I want to be real, Iceland. A voice whispered in her ear, you should let me out. I have waited so long. She grabbed the poker from where it lay on the ground and lifted it, bringing it down to strike the glass. A gloved hand reached out of the frame and snatched hold of her wrist, forcing her to drop the poker in shock. A puppet has no soul, but it can do harm. It cackled, drawing her closer to the frame. You're my puppet now. Your soul is mine. No! She screamed, grabbing at the nearest object, a porcelain bird, and throwing it at the puppet. You aren't real. None of this is real. She felt the world begin to blur and tried to pull away from its grip. But it was too late. This couldn't be it. This couldn't be how this ended for her. This wasn't fair. This wasn't fair. You aren't real, she cried as her mind began to break. You aren't real. She felt the rancid breath of the puppet as it whispered in her ear, "And now neither are you." Thank you for being here to listen with me. Let's enjoy the new story together. When the world went gray. Joy, happiness, life, creation, the spark of beginning, the heartbeat of earth itself, the endless manifestation of color and beauty and light, blossoming, growing, unfurling into something infinite. And then, one day, nothing. The world, once bursting with radiance, was swallowed whole, devoured by an oblivion so complete that even memory faded to grayscale, leaving behind only the cruel, inescapable taunt of black and white, a silent mockery of what once was, shadows of what had been clung to the charred land beyond our shelter, reaching with desperate fingers toward a sky that had long since turned its back. And as the relentless nothingness took and took and took, we were left only to bear witness, to suffer in the empty remains of what we had destroyed. And as the world faded to monochrome, I became one of the countless shades of despair. Our city, once flooded with bustling citizens driving cars of every color, is reduced skeletal frames of buildings and cracked roads, a cruel reminder of the countless nights I spent, sleepless, hidden away in my attic, thriving off the colors coating my paint palette. The word around us hasn't just been burned, it's been erased, the vibrancy stripped away. I look around our underground shelter, and for people struggling to survive, everyone was perfectly content with making conversation from the concrete where they sat, as if they weren't on their deathbeds. We scrape by with the rations the leaders distribute weekly, our bodies weakened by hunger, our minds fractured by the unbearable monotony of a world without color. But it isn't the hunger or paranoia that haunts us, but the weight of absence, the memories of color fading with each passing, dissolving to add to the torture of the ash flakes contaminating the air. Black, white, gray, repeat, every damn time. And then I find myself thinking the same, though I thought since the day the world was drained of color. This is a dream. Colors can't just disappear, and yet here we were in this mere sketch of what was, a vast land that stretched on through the remains of the nuclear tragedy, colored in shades of ash and bone, where nothing grows and nothing dares to blossom. For now, I resort to my only escape, my eyelids suddenly feeling too heavy, my mind too weary. Symptoms we've long since accepted as the norm, and allow myself to relax against the concrete wall. Part 1. Rations are low. Too low. A small group of us was sent into the depths of our despair to scrounge together enough food to ensure our, at the least, survival. Survival doesn't always grace the entirety of our measly society, and it's unfortunate. But death, even at 17, is not an unfamiliar fate. I look out into the rubble, finally lifting my eyes from my sneakered feet for the first time since they stepped beyond the shelter's entrance. The land is silent. The only sound, the crunching of boots landing against who knows what, and the whipping wind nipped at my skin, scattering my once auburn-streaked hair across the back of my jacket. Black, white, gray, a gleam catches my eye. We're at the edge of the ruins. That's impossible. My feet are already betraying me, already venturing closer to this foreign feeling of freedom. 5 years ago was the last time I was graced with the presence of color. 5 years since the bombs. 5 years since this world was diminished to a mere grayscale. 5 years. For color to still exist would be out of the question. I track the glistening spar of hope, forcing my eyes to stay open, forcing my feet one in front of the other, until, where'd it go? I blink. Scanning the scene, my eyes dart frantically from each piece of colorless scrap to the next. Come on. Come on. Come. Nothing. The unmistakable feeling of wilted grass prickles at my knees as they hit the ground where it was. The hope of color in an achromatic world slipped through my hoary fingers like sand slipping through the grasp of the ocean spray continuously. Elara? Sienna, one of the other young scavengers, asked, kneeling down in front of me. You okay? I blink back tears I didn't know were welling, forcing composure I don't have, even as I feel the feather-light touch of Sienna's hand on my shoulder. I know I can tell Sienna the truth. She did take me in after the bombs killed my parents, but to burden her would be to break myself in the process. Yeah. My voice is breathy, as if I'm questioning my own answer, while letting the first one that comes to mind slip past my lips. If anyone is going to believe me, it's going to be her. She is the only family I have left, after all. I thought I saw color. Sienna's muted, but still striking. Once blue eyes go wide, clawing to clench onto the sliver of hope and clinging onto it like a lifeline. Anything, everything. She leans closer, the shoulder-length ashy hue filling her head, now slipping past her ear. If anyone can find it, it's you. She said it like it was the easiest thing in the world. But that was just the way Sienna made everything seem easy. Like it wasn't the sight reignites a desperate hope, a longing to believe that life, in its fullest form, is not truly gone. Part 2. I can't pretend like it didn't happen. I can't unsee it. I know it's risky. I know there are people here who need every last bit of help they can get. But if there's a better, beautifully vivid world out there, inching to be found, it needs to be found. So here I am, in the thick, inky embrace of the dead of night, my fingers curling tightly around the worn, chilled rungs of the ladder that stretches upward like a fragile, rust-bitten bridge to a world I have long since sworn, with every fiber of my being, to unravel, to tear apart piece by piece if that's what it takes, all in pursuit of that elusive, flickering glint, something small, something distant, something that once dared to catch and hold the fleeting light of a bleached and weary sun. Because if there is one truth I refuse to let slip through the cracks of time, it is that color, in all its wild, untamed brilliance, is not just an indulgence, not merely an ornament to be admired from afar, but a necessity, a lifeblood that the world not only craves, but deserves to be drenched in, to be wholly consumed by. And if it is within my grasp to bring it back, to pry it from the hands of whatever force dares to smother it, then I will chase it, seize it, and deliver it without hesitation, no matter the cost. Singed, sealed, delivered. Address: a monochrome world once called Earth. Surrounded by rubble, I step out into the spotted sky and let the chill of a rare wind smack me right in the face, a stark contrast to the warmth seeping across my chest. I shake my head at myself and how I utterly disregarded the warnings of the other survivors, and so effortlessly snuck out of the security of our shelter into the wasteland so eagerly. I glance around the land stretched out before me, waste crowding the ground and ashes polluting the air, and I swear the hues of gray, now illuminated by stars and a moon, that appeared as dots and a waning semicircle, were darker than black, everything meshing with the ink-stained sky. I will find it. I'll find it. If it kills me, I will. Then, just beyond the endless stretch of night, a shimmer, the faintest trace of warmth against the cold monotony. It's real, I murmur, though no one is around to overhear. It has to be. Part 3. I walk for hours, and it still feels like I've gone nowhere. I'm still surrounded by the gray void, still surrounded by remains of a better life, and still with the shimmering speck of hope before me, not stopping. The landscape is an endless graveyard of the past. Twisted steel, collapsed buildings, and roads that crack beneath my feet stretch on like the bones of a forgotten civilization. Everything is still. No birds cry overhead, no wind whispers through trees, because there are no trees left to whisper through. The silence is heavy, pressing against me like the weight of the sky itself. I huff, pressing my back against a crumbling door, not bothering to look at the house, but rather the swing set across the road, peering intently as it swings back and forth in the stillness of night, moved by something unseen, perhaps the ghost of the child who cherished it. A sigh slips past my lips at the tempting offer of sleep, but refusing to give in quiet yet. I push my weight forward. My feet drag, weighing me down. Black, white, gray, repeat. It's infuriating that I can't close the distance between me and my last hope of color. My eyes snag on a reflection in the road. My pace quickens. My footfalls echo in the empty, colorless world as I near the glinting surface. A mirror, cracked, dirt-speckled, abandoned in the middle of the road, like it doesn't belong. Like nothing belongs. I slow, breathing hard. My reflection stares back at me, distorted by the fractures spider webbing across the glass. The same dull world is behind me. The same lifeless sky above. But beneath me, just beyond the cracks, something else, green, my breath catches. A patch of grass, impossibly vivid, bleeding through the reflection as if it exists in another world. As if it's real, somewhere, somehow. I step forward, heart pounding, kneeling at the mirror's edge. My fingers hover over the glass. The colors look too bright, too alive, like they'd burn if I touched them. But I don't hesitate. I kick the mirror. It shatters under my heel with a sharp, crystalline crack. Splinters of glass scatter across the road, glinting like stars in the empty light. I brace myself for something, anything. A shift in the air, a tremor in the ground, a door opening where there was none before. But when I look down, the green is gone, just shards of broken glass, catching the darkened sky in their edges. Just my own reflection, fractured into 100 jagged pieces. I lurch forward, scraping at the road where the mirror used to be. Nothing. No hidden portal. No sliver of color left behind. My hands shake. Tears, clear wetness, drip down my cheeks in slowed fashion. My breathing comes in clipped gasps. I saw it. I know I did. The wind stirs, sending a few stray fragments skittering away. I watch them disappear down the road, swallowed by the nothingness stretching endlessly ahead. And then I keep walking, pushing harder, further, relentless. Part 4. I refuse to let myself stop. I won't. I can't. Not if I want any chance at finding the color I've recklessly craved. My eyes follow the path I left in the dust. the sun rising higher in the sky. And then, thunk, the ground hits me before I can brace for it. Pain shoots through my skull in sharp, electric volts. I glance up, dazed, and see the thick trunk of the tree I just slammed into. Its rough bark pressing into my chest, pinning me to the earth. I wince, trying to push myself up, but my head swims with dizziness. The tree stands tall, towering over me like an ancient sentinel, its branches casting long shadows in the early morning light. I can feel its strength, as if it's mocking my weakness, daring me to rise again. I press my palms to the ground, leaves crunching beneath them, and accept this tree's challenge. The rough earth presses against my skin, grounding me in this moment, daring me to rise. A chill runs through my spine as I push myself up, dirt clinging to my fingertips. The air is thick, damp, charged with something unseen but undeniable. Prepared to confront the tree, I stand to my feet and ball my fists, the tension in my body coiling like a spring. I'm ready. My knuckles tighten, breath steadying, until a sharp, almost imperceptible sting pricks at my palm. Crunch. My hand flattens instinctively, fingers twitching as I feel the sensation spread. The leaves, crisp and brittle, stick to my skin like they belong there. A brief annoyance flickers through me, and I almost brush them off without a second thought, until something stops me cold. The color, not gray, not black, not the dry, lifeless husks of darkness. These leaves are green. It's faint, fading, dying, but it's there. The realization steals the breath from my lungs. Green here. Among the decay, color still exists, but it is fading. The world is not truly black and white. It is dying in slow motion. The nuclear bombs did not erase color. It severed life's connection to it, leaving only those who remember it to witness its vanishing. A smirk, one I haven't worn since the day of the bombs, breaks across my lips. It all makes sense. I have to find the color. I have to find the, what about everyone else? What about Sienna? I cut myself off, bending to gather a handful of dull leaves from the ground. Sienna would want this. If anyone can find it, it's you. My grip on the leaves tightens, as if I can hold on to her words, onto her, for guidance, like I always have. And I intend to do just that. One step. For hope, another. For faith, 2 steps. For a new life, another. For Sienna. And then I'm sprinting, not daring to look back. So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.